Welcome to the Build to Scale podcast. I'm Reem Panchar, your host, and today we have a special guest joining us, Paul Grady, founder and CEO at Crucial Data Solutions. Paul, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking some time out of your probably very busy schedule to talk and have a great conversation on this podcast. Where are you calling from?
I am calling from South Reno, Nevada, just outside of Lake Tahoe, on the Nevada side.
Cool. Well, again, thank you for joining. So before we dive into the topics that we have today that we'd like to explore together, do you want to give me a brief background on your journey into your current role of CEO at Crucial Data Solutions?
I'm 64 years old. Okay, so my journey is a long one. I was educated back in the mid 80s as a software developer, engineer type of person. I've seen literally every technology since then, which is really the advent of the microprocessor, which of course changed the entire world. And as technologies advanced, I started and formed various companies. Ended up in the clinical research industry, if you will, and a software company. And I started Crucial 15 years ago. This is our 15th year in 2010. We've been very successful as a company, profitable. One of the rare things you'll find is that we are self-funded. So we have complete control of all the decisions that are made. And that might be one of the reasons why our technology is quite advanced. And so that's pretty much been my journey.
Nice. Well, congrats on 15 years. Definitely something to be proud of. And well, that's exciting. I'd love to hear more about what you guys do at Crucial Data Solutions. In a nutshell, what do you do?
Okay, well, we have a software system that runs natively on the world's three platforms, that being the web, iOS, and Android. And that software system has two main functions. One is data collection for clinical trials, and the other is clinical trial management. And so just a simple example would be if you have a drug or device and you would like to someday market that, you feel as though it has some efficacy in the society, what you would do is you would create a series of case report forms and a clinical trial. You would collect the data using a system like ours, which is a system that is regulatory compliant. And you would take that data and eventually submit it to some sort of regulatory body, and they would, give you some sort of approval. That's an oversimplification of but that's what our system does. It collects the data, it manages the data insofar as it allows that data to be regulatory compliant. The FDA has quite a few standards in place to avoid things like data fraud and stuff like that. And using our system allows you to avoid all those pitfalls and pass audits and stuff like that. So we are a data collection machine, and then once the data is in, we can aggregate it, analyze it, and do a variety of other things, quite frankly.
Curiosity, what made you decide to start your company? I know you do have a little bit of experience based on how you explained and your background. You did work in clinical trials, but what made you kind of get that idea to start this specific company?
Well, my last company focused more on clinical services. A certain type of company in our industry is called a clinical research organization, and they provide the services, things like recruiting participants, recruiting investigators, sites, that sort of thing, building protocols, et cetera, et cetera. And that company was originally founded to be more of a technology company, and it veered off more into technology and services. And so I thought what this industry really needs is a pure technology company. We have plenty of CROs. Quite frankly, my former company wasn't very good at being a CRO. We lost a lot of money doing that. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go off and create a technology company. To that end, that's exactly what I did. We've been focusing on technology ever since. We partner now with CROs, train them on how to use our software and do their thing.
Just for everyone to understand, what is the CRO abbreviation standing for?
Clinical Research Organization. In the clinical research industry, CRO is just a very common acronym, but outside of that, I can see what you're asking.
Cool. Thank you for clarifying. So Maybe we can start diving into some trends, like big trends that you're seeing in your industry. This can be in the overall tech industry, or it can be specific to your line of work. What are some big trends you see are really happening this year and even going into 2025?
All right. Well, I'll stick mostly with my industry, and that will also cover the technology part because as new technology comes out, we embrace it immediately. And so some of the bigger trends, just on a bulleted list, would be things like AI. That's a big trend. Mobile technology, another big trend. Wearable technology. Everybody has one of these, or an Oura Ring, or a Fitbit, or something that is tracking their various health metrics. Okay. Some of the other things that are happening are blockchain and stuff. So one of the big challenges we have in this industry is that there's a lot of data out there, but the data that we're collecting for clinical trials has to go through very, very stringent regulatory restrictions, okay? So that we know the clinical trial data is absolutely the gold standard of data. It's true, it's real, it just is. Okay, there's a lot of data out there that's collected in other forms and means that probably doesn't go through some of these regulatory hurdles like clinical trial data. And the result of your data or what you're trying to get out of your data is directly correlated with the quality of your data. And unfortunately, with clinical trials, oftentimes we collect the data for a clinical trial. The data is submitted to the regulatory authority. The regulatory authority does their thing, and that data just goes and resides somewhere and is never reused. We now have the technology to not only reuse it, but effectively reuse it, and reuse it allowing researchers from every walk of life, from academia to sponsor companies to CROs to companies like myself or ours, to reuse that sort of data. And by doing so, we have a tremendous opportunity to reduce the cost of clinical research. Okay, and so that's kind of where it comes in. AI comes in every facet of research. So within research, there's a variety of different roles for people during the process. There's participants. Can't have research without participants. And so a lot of the cost analysis of clinical research is to recruit a participant for an advanced neuro study can be upwards of $100,000 per participant. So data and finding these people is very, very challenging and very expensive. Okay, so what we're able to do now is we're able to create data sets based on historic data. And when I say historic data, I'm talking about historic clinical trial data. One of the challenges today is those data sets are now owned by the sponsor company, sometimes even the CRO. The difference between a sponsor and a CRO is the sponsor may have invented the drug or device. The CRO takes that and runs it through the clinical trial process. Okay, so those data warehouses are pretty much locked down by those companies. Okay, one of the technologies that we've really been working on is a blockchain technology that takes that data, changes ownership from the sponsor or CRO to the participant who should own that data. It is their data, after all. And by doing so, we're able to put that data on a blockchain. Now, a blockchain is a chain of records, if you will, that can contain all sorts of different data, can contain pointers to other databases, et cetera, et cetera. One of the very unique things is it's immutable. It can't be changed. So there's no opportunity for fraud there. One of the other things that's really unique about blockchain is that it's accessible, okay, securely accessible. And through mechanisms like smart contracts, if we're able to create a participant blockchain, any researcher can go into a standard user interface and create a very, very complex data set of clinical trial data that is really focused on their area of research. So let's say you're studying Parkinson's. You might be able to go into the blockchain and say, okay, here's the data that I want. Go out and find me the participants and populate my data set. Again, another oversimplification, but that's what we're talking about. The participants own that data and it becomes an asset. And it can become an asset for, years, decades to come. Okay, and so through smart contracts and possibly even a cryptocurrency, these researchers can build their data sets, compensate the participants, and begin their research immediately. And this data could be longitudinal in nature. It can cover 5 years of clinical research. And by doing so, you're literally conducting a 5-year clinical trial, which could cost, upwards of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. You're conducting that trial with historical data in a matter of a day. Okay, so you can imagine the cost savings for that. And why is cost savings important? Cost savings is important because any media outlet you look at, they talk about the cost of healthcare, the availability of healthcare, the effectiveness of treatments, et cetera, et cetera. And so the first line of healthcare costs is clinical research. And clinical research costs are very, very high because of some of the things I've just mentioned. And by reducing those costs, and in some case, we believe we can reduce the cost through technology by as much as 99%, what you're doing is you're reducing the cost of healthcare overall. Not only that, but by reducing that cost, you are able to allow more participants access to healthcare. And by doing so, you're obviously benefiting society. But reducing costs isn't just that. Reducing costs allows these very, very innovative companies to create more products and to study their products even harder. And that will increase the efficacy of treatments. And so not only are we going to be able to provide more healthcare to people through technology, but we're going to make the treatments a whole lot better. And then you take something like AI. Okay, our AI analytics right now within TrialKit literally assist a biostatistician. And I say assist because they can do a lot of the real laborious work. And so our AI, you can literally say to it, aggregate me a data set. And within that data set, I want to know the probability that a participant with this BMI of this gender will have an adverse event within 2 days of taking this medication. And that's just one example. Use your imagination. You can ask it anything. Once data has been ingested by AI, what used to take us months and sometimes even years now takes us, minutes. Okay. And so that's one really, really good use for AI. One of the things that we're doing is you're seeing a lot of AI companies pop up. This is not unlike in the 2010, 2009, 2008, when .com came aboard. Anybody with a .com, got plenty of funding from investors. And we're seeing that with AI companies. One of their problems is they don't have data though. And so we're empowering AI with our data collection engine. And by doing that, we're giving them, a revenue stream for their business. And so we call it data as a service. And it's something that you're going to see a lot of in the future. This participant blockchain that I referred to, that's going to happen. It's just a question of when. Okay, there's some resistance out there. I mean, particularly the holders and owners of this data currently, I don't think they quite see the light yet. It benefits everybody, not just the participant, not just other researchers, but even the stakeholders. Okay? Because now they can take their product and learn from other products. And by pooling our resources, we know that we're going to get a much better end result. Hopefully that wasn't too long-winded there.
No, that's great. I mean, these are really exciting initiatives that you're working on. And I think when we talk to different companies, there's a lot of interest in using AI, but most companies haven't really figured out clear, valuable use cases when you have, right? You gave me a great example, and there's so many other examples we can think of, and how, a biostatistician can actually use this kind of platform, this kind of technology, to really be more productive and get answers in a really short amount of time. And then on the blockchain side of things, it's definitely also incredible what kind of impact you can have, right? You're right. And it is a bit of a controversial take, if I can say that, if you don't mind me saying that. And that was going to be my next question. Is there resistance, and what are the challenges in implementing a technology like that? Because I would assume companies are this is such a new concept. There may not be warm to it yet. And if so, how are you overcoming that?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. A very good question. This is a very, very disruptive technology and idea. Okay, and so one of the things I mentioned is the stakeholders oftentimes are very, very large pharmaceutical companies, very large clinical research organizations. They do have their own databases, but they are locked down. Okay, only they can access them. And that data is very, very valuable. And so there is some resistance on their part. We're too small to do this on our own. Where we're at right now is we're in the process of creating a scaled down model. In other words, we have a patient, a patient or participant, same thing, by the way, interchangeable words, a participant blockchain, okay, that allows a researcher to go in and create a very simple data set, and through smart contracts, the participants who aren't real people yet are paid along the way using one of our own tokens or cryptocurrencies. So the first step is proving the concept, and I think we've done that to that end. I think we have done that. The second step is now trying to create some sort of consortium where if we can find some influencers that we can start to gain some traction on this idea. And that might be the biggest challenge. And it may not happen even in my lifetime. Getting the ball rolling is very important. I think one of the things that's unique about this industry, and one of the reasons I have faith that this will happen someday, because it's tremendous benefits to society. But one of the things is that most of the companies, if not all in this industry, their primary goal is not to increase shareholder wealth. Our primary goal is to improve the quality of life of patients. Okay, our secondary goal is to increase shareholder wealth. They are not mutually exclusive. You have to stay in business to, to improve the quality of life of patients, but I believe most companies feel that way. And so any idea that does just that will gain traction eventually. One other thing about this industry is it's very slow to adapt change and very resistant for that matter. And so we'll have to see, how far we can take this, but the first step was proving the concept with a scaled down model so that companies can actually see how this works, how they can get benefits from this by releasing their data. And so that's probably the biggest hurdle to this whole thing. As far as our data as a service business, there's no resistance to that whatsoever. AI is going to change everything. Many of these companies have come up with really groundbreaking ideas. I don't want to name names here, but we have a company that has an algorithm that can very accurately, it has been approved by the FDA, predict early onset neurodisorders, things like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, any sort of dementia, cerebral palsy. I can go on and on and on. And by doing so, obviously, we can treat that earlier. We can learn a whole lot more about the disease. We have some very effective treatments for these sorts of disease now. Lots and lots, billions of dollars are being put into neurodisorders. And some of these treatments are very effective. And this sort of algorithm can really measure the efficacy of some of these treatments. And so that side of the business is going to explode. There's no question about it. The participant blockchain is the biggest disruptive technology and idea that this industry has probably ever seen and probably ever will. And so that will be met with some resistance, but we have a game plan, and we do have some very influential partners as well. And we're hoping to get traction through that.
Very cool. Well, this is great. This is really fascinating and interesting. I think just kind of as on a side note, when it comes to healthcare right now, I mean, there's been some, events lately that are just driving a lot of Americans to complain and maybe see the healthcare system as kind of greedy, if I can say that, live on this podcast. But the way you're explaining what you're working on and all the technologies that can really help improve patient quality of life, it kind of gives me hope. And I hope it gives hope to anybody who's listening.
Let me just comment on that, because I know what you're referring to, and let's just talk about the payers. Okay, I'm just going to use that as a very general word. I think people know what payers are. Okay, and so there's a tremendous challenge for payers. I'm not going to defend the way they do things. I don't know enough about it. I can't defend it, nor can I place blame on them. I just don't know enough about it. But what I do know is reimbursement for treatments becomes a lot easier if you actually have data that proves the efficacy of a treatment. Okay, and so when we talk about the participant blockchain, one of the biggest benefactors will be the payers, and it should bring down the cost of, health insurance. I said it. Okay. And
Love it.
that's just one of the government. We already talked about sponsors and CROs and tiny little companies that need to do the research before they can even put their compounds or their devices together. All of them are enormous benefactors, and this data now is all of a sudden available. But maybe the biggest benefactor are the participants who, in many cases, are faced with, some of life's most difficult challenges. And monetizing that or making that an asset in some small way probably helps. It certainly will help their dependents and, the people that mean the most to them. And so this idea, it doesn't just benefit big drug companies. It benefits absolutely every component of clinical research and healthcare in general.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great. I think your vision and the technologies that you're using and these initiatives are so disruptive in a good way. So really looking forward to seeing what the future has in store for Crucial Data Solutions and all the impact you guys are going to be able to create. It's really inspiring and great to hear.
Well, thank you.
Great. So what do you think is your vision for your company like in the next, I don't want to say 3 to 5 years? I know you talked about the impact of blockchain. That's obviously a massive one. Are there other priorities or things that make up your vision for the next 3 to 5 years at Crucial Data Solutions?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. Blockchain isn't going to produce us any revenue, maybe ever. Okay, this is just something that's going to benefit society. We have a lot of engineers that have been in this industry for decades, and we know it inside and out. And it's just an idea that we formulated as a company, and we're going to push it through. All of the costs that are associated with us putting together this, the scaled down participant blockchain, we're just going to incur those costs. It's worth it. It's well worth it. One of the biggest things you're going to find are wearable devices. And within our studies, any wearable device that can update the Google Connect database or the Apple Health database, you can drag and drop into one of our studies. And so one of the big things and one of the big trends in clinical research is called decentralized clinical trials. Back in the day, a participant always had to go into the site, and the site did all the measurements, and the participant would go home, and that's obviously very expensive. So collecting data might be, once every 3 months. With wearable devices and our technology, we are now collecting our participant vital signs. I mean, things like resting heart rate, sleep analysis, I can go on, blood pressure, anything that you can think of, blood oxygen. Those sorts of patient vital signs, we can collect them daily, okay, and sometimes multiple times a day. The algorithms in these wearable devices that I referred to can only measure certain things, like a resting heart rate can only be measured at certain times during the day. You don't want to try to measure a resting heart rate right after a large period of activity, that sort of thing. But we can pull that data multiple times a day now. And by increasing the amount of data and applying that to our AI analytics, we're getting answers earlier and much, much better answers. And so, that is going to really revolutionize this industry as more companies do it. And it's not just human trials. I mean, when you talk about feeding the world, the United States has an enormous responsibility to feed the world. That's what we do. I mean, we are the largest agriculture company in our country in the world by far. And so to do so, we need to have healthier livestock, better crops, okay? Try to remove some of the toxins that are showing up in our food supply and stuff like that. In order to do that, we have to study animals, okay? And some of our treatments, quite frankly, can't start with humans. They're too dangerous. And so we do animal trials that way as well. But there's now many, many devices that really function as like an Apple Watch for an animal. And so these animal trials are mostly now just things like labs and wearable information. Where we used to say, take a look at your dog and tell me how many times a day he scratches, we now have devices that tell us that. Okay, and so these companies are making life better for livestock, for your pets, okay, for various fertilizers and stuff like that. So the whole ability to just put on a simple device that does so much for you, but also tracks your health, okay, is game changing. And That's one of the areas that we're going to, mobile technology and wearable technology. And we, as far as I know, we have the only native platforms for that. Okay, and that when I say native, that means our iOS app is downloaded from the App Store and our Android app is downloaded from the Google Play Store. And so these aren't web apps, and that makes them much, much more powerful.
So that's great. That's exciting. And then maybe for next year, what are some big priorities? Because I think we talked a lot about what's going to happen maybe 3 to 5 years from now, the blockchain project, and all of that. But immediately, what is going to be your biggest focus for next year? Are there any priorities that are important to you?
Sure. I mean, we will continue doing what we're doing, which is conducting clinical research studies using our software, trying to reduce costs and shorten durations of studies using advanced technology. The big thing for 2025 is our data as a service proposition, which takes your AI and allows you to collect data and makes your AI a whole lot more effective. We believe that will be a booming industry for us, and I'm not aware of any other companies that are really focusing on that. Even if they are, we have 15 years of data collection experience under our belt and three completely separate technologies running on the three various platforms. And so we have a tremendous head start with that. And those are the two things that we're working on this year, and to continue, obviously, to develop this blockchain and try to get the word out on very successful podcasts such as this one. One of the reasons we were very excited to do that, and that's what we're looking at in the next year.
Very cool. Well, if any of our listeners want to get more information about Crucial Data Solutions and maybe connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
Well, you can connect with us on LinkedIn at Crucial Data Solutions. You can go to our website, which is crucialdatasolutions.com, and you can send me an email. I don't know if you want to post my email address here, but you're more than welcome to do so. I answer every email. It's sometimes, it gets to be a little busy doing that, but I do like to hear from people, particularly if they have ideas, if they're looking for some sort of partnership, if they have some technology that they can bring to the table that's going to advance some of these technologies of our own. We're all ears.
I think this is probably the perfect setting for you to connect with other companies with whom you can build a partnership with, just because of our audience and where the podcast is going to be distributed, where the content is going to be distributed, even on LinkedIn with our audience. I'm really excited we got to do that because I think that's going to be a great way to connect with others.
Right. And one of the beauties of this podcast is it doesn't just focus on clinical research technology, it focuses on technology. And so our hopes are that technologists in other industries that have created various technologies hear this and say, wow, our technology can really help with this, and get a hold of us that way. And then we're all benefactors.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate your time today, and really looking forward to seeing what you guys are going to build in the next few years. Check out what Crucial Data Solutions does and connect with awesome people like Paul. So thank you, Paul. I appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your very insightful questions. And I wish you all the best of luck in the future. And I'm sure we'll be crossing paths again someday.